Today is first and foremost cover all the 5 lectures in a very short synopsis. What we try to do is take the 4 major beliefs: Buddhism, Islam, toward Sufism, Christianity, and Judaism, and wrap it up in a sense of what is the real mechanism between the 4 and what's the differences, focusing on the mystical part. Today, unlike the past 5 weeks, because there's a lot to cover, you can take a break whatever you wish to, instead of having a formal, whatever, 5-7 minutes break in between. You're very welcome to ask questions, and anytime you feel that you have something you want me to add, just raise your hand, and then I'll stop and deal with that. Is the technical issue solved or still taking? Okay, so.
I'm sorry, we're working on it.
Okay. So meanwhile, I'll change my plan and I'll just start with some materials that I'm going to speak to you, and then we go to the PowerPoint and the screen. All the 4 major religions are basically having the same thought, the same idea, that there is some cosmos, something above, that connected to us below. The big difference is the interpretation, how the leaders throughout generation interpreted those important dogmas. Since I try to cover 4 major teaching of 4 different faith group or religion, I try to do justice and cover in the somehow equal time each of them. I assume you know that the easy part for me is the Judaism, simply because I'm involved with that part for many years in my life. And when we're speaking about Judaism, there is a very core belief as far as timing that Judaism started earlier. If you look at the timing of the Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism, Judaism preceded, but the development in Judaism is so great, and the changes that took place since the early time of biblical Abraham and Sarah, that it's in many ways so much lack of justice to cover the mystical part in like 15-20 minutes. Anyway, I try to deal with that in a different angle. And the 2 words I would like to share with you today, one word is called galut, it's a Hebrew word, and the second word is called geula. Is anyone here heard these 2 Hebrew words? Please raise your hand. How many of you know galut? Okay, 3 people. How many of you know geula? The Hebrew word geula? Okay, you don't know it yet. Okay. What? Galut in Hebrew, Gimel Lamed Vav Tav. G-A-L-U-T, sorry. Meaning exile. That's Galut. Exile. Exile, it means sadness, suffering, setback. That's Galut. Geula, redemption. Salvation, hope. Geula, G-E-U-L-A, but it's basically redemption, salvation, hope. All 4 religions dealing with the cause and effect. Buddhism holds that for every tragedy, for every suffering, there is a cause, there is a reason why persons suffer. The main reason in Buddhism, you remember we discussed it, what's the main reason of suffering? It's because attachment, very good. What else? Remember we discussed 3 elements in Buddhism, 3 core elements in Buddhism, you remember them? That's the consequences, but the 3 elements, the 3 dharma of Buddhism. Anybody remember? Number 1, everything is impermanent, nothing is separate itself, and nirvana is quiescent. You remember that? Thank you. So, with that in mind, there is a cause and a result, cause and effect, which means anything you see has a reason for that. So I'm going to share with you several scenarios of Galut and Geula, exile and redemption, cause and result. And then I'm going to demonstrate to you the 4 different approaches to almost current events. The first one is the PowerPoint working now, or still not? No? Okay. Okay. Ready? Not a moment. Sorry, not my fault. That's right. Yes. Just go to a PowerPoint. Okay, that's part of Jewish suffering, my suffering, who knows? Okay, there is an old debate, serious old debate, about the connectedness between the Holocaust and the state of Israel. I know I'm talking to a big part of this crowd is Jewish crowd. So you may recall last week it was a Yom HaShoah, a Holocaust Memorial Day. And this upcoming week, Tuesday is the IDF, Israeli Defense Force Remembrance Day, and Wednesday is Yom HaAtzmaut, the Israel Independence Day. So it's a very deep debate, the real relationship between Holocaust and the state of Israel. The painful debate is really one connected to the other, which means the state of Israel, with all the big establishment in almost 64 years, is that really connected or necessary to the early part, 2.5 years earlier, the Holocaust. It's very difficult for anybody to describe the Shoah, the Holocaust. If you try to put together and say there is no relationships between the Holocaust and the state of Israel, and one has nothing to do with the other, then there are a list of questions that one may ask. For example, the timing. The end of World War II, at least formally, declared on May 9, 1945. This terrible war that causes so many people to perish, Jews and non-Jews, but particularly the 1.5 million children, or altogether about 6 million Jews. It's excuse me, it's something that's very, very hard for all the different scholars to analyze, and there are many who are expert in this field try to explain and rationalize the Holocaust. But what's clear, the relationship between May 9, 1945, November 29, 1947, and May 15, 1948, all these three important dates are basically a landmark of 2.5 years between, in many people and many thinkers, between exile and redemption and salvation. Now, the question I'm going to present to you, excuse me, it's a very painful question. I don't think I can formulate a clear answer right away, but here's the question. Do we really have to lose, the Jewish people really have to lose 6 million people in order to have the Jewish state? Was this a really historical necessity? And why this is a serious question? Because when we're talking about the cause and effect, and we speak about the correlation between suffering for a reason and a result, this is a very serious debate, is one has to do with the other. Why? Because the timing is so close, and the idea that for so many years there is a yearning to have independent state, it's very difficult to say that one has nothing to do with the other. There are those who hold that it has nothing to do with faith or religion or anything. It has to do solely and only with coincidences, which means United Nations recognized that there is a need for people to have their own state, and therefore that's the result, that's what happened. Others, the evangelical Christians, for sure many scholars, secular and religious, they hold that the timing is so close, the relationship between these three events are so connected to each other, that has to be a very strong correlation between the two. Thank you. Okay. Yes, thank you. We get it straight eventually. Hello everyone, those who just walked in. Good to have you here for our great finale. What we're going to do today, as we said, is the comparison of the four. And the first topic is the cause and effect. We talk about exile and redemption, which in Hebrew it's called Galut and Geulah. And we ask a question, and the question is the one has to do with the other. It's really correlated. Why I'm using this part? I think this is very applicable question, example, that the entire world is still in debate. The cause and the effect. The strong relationship between the two, not only in the individual level, but in a sense of the world responds. The point I try to make is the timing. The timing is very, very close, in a sense, in the history of the Jewish people, which is about little more than 3,300 years, or if you go to the time the Jewish people believe the Abraham and Sarah's time, it's a little more than 4,000 years. You feel that there has to be something, one connected to the others. You may say that it's all by coincidence. It's all the thing that happens, nothing to do with the other. The only thing I try to say for those who just walk in is the idea that the timing is so short that it's very hard to give an explanation that it's absolute no either mystical or divine prophecy or relationship between the two. So here are an example. This is a story of about 100,000 out of about 6 million Jews that perished during the Shoah, during the Holocaust. It was again estimated that about 100,000 survived. It's not clear, that's what the experts said. Yet the big problem with this number is what happened to those who survived? And why, with all said and done that the Holocaust is over, in a sense that the war is over, yet those 100,000 still have an issue of finding a place. Again, they are looking for a place to live. They try to escape Europe, and basically many of those countries, Western countries, refuse to have them. So an example was the British Mandate. Very painful part in Jewish history, but that's the reality, and some of you may recall those incidences. The British Mandate was the part that controlled, at that time they called it Palestine, and they basically allow, how many, anybody knows, how many they allow enter the land of Palestine? How many? They have about 100,000 survivors. How many of them allowed to enter Palestine? Who said 5,000? What is your name? Smart lady. Gail, very nice, it's correct. What? Lynn, sorry. Lynn. 5,000, that's true. What happened, the British Mandate, they want to have a peace with the Arab world. They don't want to have any demographic problem. It's the same as the oil business and all this. And it was a very heavy demonstration. If you read carefully what they said in those demonstrations, 6 million Jews murdered, it's not enough for Britain, for example. So it was a huge demonstrations, yet they didn't care. They allowed only 5,000. So those people who survived were basically not just broken-hearted people who lost everything. It was estimated many of them have 25 to 30 kilograms. They have no family and no place to go. Now, what happened to these people? Again, in a way, it's mind-boggling how the British Mandate basically sent them back to death, which means they either send them to those countries that refuse them, which is another way to kill them, or they really sank some of their big boats with the survivor. You try to think about Western countries, even countries like United States, why they did it and why they refuse all these refugees. And again, it's one of those painful questions in history. But the reality is that those about 100,000 survival, they have no place to go. So what do you do with them? You should kill them? Yes, some felt should kill them. It was a huge demonstrations, and as a result, it was a formulation of 4 different groups in Israel. Before that, the state of Israel was born. It was the Haganah, Lehi, Exile, Palmach, these famous 4 Israeli groups, much before the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, that they gathered together and they start figuring out some way that they have a recognition of a state. And this is, again, one of the most painful questions. It was the United Nations resolution in 1947. In that resolution, with all the interfering of the United Nations, they allow to not only annul the British Mandate, but also to have a Jewish state. The good fortune in that sense is the Arab world refused the United Nations resolution. The Arab world on November 1947 respond to the United Nations resolution and David Ben-Gurion proclamation of the Jewish state in a very simple way. They first and foremost sent the Air Force to bomb the central station of Tel Aviv, which cost 41 people's life. So in other words, in one hand, they danced in the street because Ben-Gurion declared a state. By the same token, it wasn't, in that sense, a big divine, because the next thing you know, it was a bloody war. The Egyptian ruler, the Pharaoh from Egypt, sent all these forces to bomb any small places that those refugees and other people from different aliyot came. And since the Jewish people have no place to go, they have no choice, but without army, without ammunition, without formulation of formal army, they went to an independence war. Now, if you try to figure that out rationally, how 7 Arab nations around very small, tiny group of people who were basically refugees and some people who made aliyot from North Africa and other Middle Eastern countries, and you try to figure out, is that really connected to what they said in the Exodus, that the more they torture the Hebrews, the more they get better. It was a war that altogether was a year and a half, but if you put together the timing of the war, it's a huge winning, because in the Arab world, especially if you count the big countries like Egypt, you're talking about 60 million people versus very few remnant, survivor, and others get together and formulate the early time of IDF. 20 years later, they have about 30 million Jews in that small Jewish state. So again, to say in 20 years, to have 3 million Jews living there, it's very hard to put together. Then the famous story of the Pharaoh, of the president of Egypt, the Nasser story, the Assad in Syria, and the next thing is the 1967, the 6 Days War. Again, mind-boggling story. Did you ever know any nation in the world that won a war over so many locations in 6 days? If you try to think in 2012, United States, you go back in the history of this nation, not much. You just need to go by the whole mean of about 70, 60 years back to this very moment. US war between Cambodia and Vietnam, and even Iraq and Afghanistan. None of these took place 6 days. So again, the big question is that just because those few people are such great in their forces, or is it divine intervention? And it's God that promised in the book of Leviticus, which evangelical Christians strongly believe, that when God used the word, they used the text in the word, that God promised that you should dwell in the land at peace. That's basically a fulfillment of that divine prophecy. 1973, the very painful Yom Kippur War. This is a famous picture of the 6 Days War when they won the wall, the Western Wall in Jerusalem. And Yom Kippur War. This is again mind-boggling story. 1973, the Jewish people gathered together in a house of worship, in synagogues, temple around the world, and at the Holy of Holy Days, in the 2 locations, Egypt and Syria, attack. That's a very holy day that the Jewish people not only praying, but doing the Musaf, the afternoon service, when the Jewish people using the word Ele Ezkerah, the mentioning of the 10 martyrs in ancient time that murdered brutally by the Romans, all of a sudden it was attack, and I recall as a little boy how just in an hour or two, the whole synagogue, a huge one in Haifa, was just almost empty. Everyone went at the middle of the war to a huge mid of the Yom Kippur, the holy day of atonement. They went to a war. Again, that was a bloody war, caused about 2,000 soldiers died, young, left families, grieving families. But again, the big question here, it happens, all that war took about 18 days. Again, the timing. They end up, again, this is a mind-boggling question, they end up 101 kilometers from Cairo. 101 kilometers from Cairo. They end up 34 kilometers from Damascus, the capital of Syria. In a simple word, the Israelis at that time, in 1973, have the opportunity to take over both Syria and Egypt. Yesterday it was exile. Yesterday they allow only 5,000 people to enter the land. Now all of a sudden, they're not only the people who are fighting back an unpredicted war, they're ending up in a sense that not only have their land, but they can expand themselves and take over the Syria and Egypt. So why they really didn't take the Syria and Egypt? Anybody knows? Give you a hint. It was again a fellow Jew that unfortunately not allowed. But before we ask that question, do you know any nation in the world that finished war, bloody war like that in 18 days? With ending in such a big winning that they can take huge countries just overnight. Is that because God promised, "V'yishavtem lavetach be'artzachem," you should dwell at peace at your land? Or it's nothing to do with the other? Now I ask you a question. Do you know what's the reason the Israeli didn't took over both Egypt and Syria? Anybody knows? Excellent. It was a fellow Jew by the name of Dr. Henry Kissinger who was strongly interfered with that, and he stopped the Israeli from doing that. Whatever the reason is, it's one of those mind-boggling questions. Is he a traitor, or is he a spy, or is he a peace-loving person, or what exactly involved with he is doing whatever he does, which again, that's not our topic. But this is a question between exile and redemption, the big question of how come in 1977 there are two great leaders in the Arab world, the late Anwar Sadat, which was the Egyptian president, and the president of Jordan, Hussein, both of them enter not only to a peace treaty. Sadat, for example, went to Israel in 1977, and in his speech at the Knesset parliament in Jerusalem, he recognized the state of Israel. Not just that, but he recognized Israel and Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, the big question we have to ask, and that's again not our topic, just a question, mind-boggling question, how come the president of Egypt recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, yet in 2012, the State Department does not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel? That's one of those questions that I don't have an answer, maybe you have. One of the recent demonstrations in DC, people are holding this very big sign stating Jerusalem is not a settlement, it's the capital of Israel. And again, if you figure that out, in 2012, people need to do that, while in 1977, Sadat recognized that as a capital. Well, with that in mind, we have to ask ourselves those questions. And the question is, after all of that established, and today in 2012, if you look at the Israelis, you see they are first in science, in all these Nobel Prizes. in sophisticated missiles, hospitals, Judaic, unprecedented yeshivot, religious institutions, anything and everything in the most high technology possible. Yet they have all these problems, not just internal problem, but the problem with the whole idea of recognition of the state or the capital of the state. It's one of those questions that at least I don't have a clear answer. Why is that? Is that because the Jewish people themselves, some of them do not really believe that the Jews deserve to have independent state, or the Jews deserve to have Jerusalem as the capital? Because remember, in 1947, when the United Nations made that resolution, and as a side note, I'm not belong to any parties, not the ambassador, not the government, not any group and any parties. I never associate myself with anyone, so don't nail me as one of any. But sincerely speaking, how come in 1947 the United Nations said, we're giving you a Jewish state, and it was a very small, narrow, that in a way, thank whatever you call it, God, or thank the idea, one second, that it turns that Jaffa, Negev, the south, the Golan, Galil, all these, Jerusalem, was not part of the United Nations resolution. Yet things turn around, and now in 2012, you ask your question, how come? And the question I want to present to you is the question I asked earlier. These 6 million Jews have to be murdered in order to again have Israel as the Jewish state. You want to say something, please?
I think we missed the major point.
Please.
The United Nations is American construction. And Harry Truman was the American president who made Israel the state of Israel. He signed the formal declaration and made it the state over what was there. But the United States, like a lot of other places, has many different forces moving in. And some of the forces in this country are on the side of the Arabs because they've got financial investments, etc. And in any democracy, it leads far apart. As far as the wars were concerned, I was in synagogue Yom Kippur Day, so I know what happened. It's a difference between what we did in Vietnam and what they did. They were fighting for survival. We were the enemy invading a foreign country, and they were fighting for survival. And that's the major force. You got to remember that. People fight for survival like they did in 3 wars. The Vietnamese were fighting survival against us or their country. Big difference.
Okay. Does everyone agree? We'll discuss this later, but that, thank you. My intention was not so much to deal with the full political science of this situation, and just present to you the question of the cause and effect. Meaning, was this an historical necessity? My core question, and in that sense I want to present to you the 4 different approach, Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, and Islam. The big question is, was this an historical necessity? In other words, if you tell me that there is no relationship between the two, then there is no relationships. But if there is a relationship between World War II and the State of Israel, is that really historical necessity? Well, if I ask you that question, what do you think Buddhism will respond to that question? Yes? Karma, excellent, which means meant to be. What does that mean? Very good. What does that mean? Explain to me. What does that mean? What? Had to happen. Who. You know what she said? That's something. Who. Does everyone heard what she said? Basically, what she said, or what he said indirectly, it has to happen, which means the Jewish people need to lose 6 million people in order to build a state. I meant, I don't say it's true or not true. I just want to show you how different faith groups approach this painful question. I'm going to show you the differences in approach and the mechanism for all four. The mechanism of all the four, it's simple. All four believe, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Buddhism, all four believe that there is a cause and effect. There is a reason for anything. The whole difference is that the interpretation, what's the real reason? What do you think Islam said? Is a correlation between World War II and the state of Israel. How did Islam respond to that? And therefore there is any connection between the Holocaust and the state of Israel?
They probably feel it wasn't complete. And they feel just the opposite.
Correct. So as you see, there is a different approach to everything. There are those who feel the opposite way. Which brings me to the point that in all four religious hold, there's a cause and effect, it's all in the interpretation. Anyone, like Leon said last week, I think his name is Leon, he's not here today. Anyway, he said last week that there is a very strong tendency among all the religious leaders to use the text for their agenda, which can be good and bad, depending how you interpreted the text. So again, if you take, for example, the text in Leviticus that said, "I should dwell in peace in your land," is that really a fulfillment of a prophecy? Depend whom you ask. Yes?
And I was also thinking that last week's Torah, it's like the lion shall dwell with, the lamb and sitting together. But this is also something that, that is what we want to start looking at divine prophecy. And I was thinking back of someone, like Saddam, that's what I'm saying, but Saddam, and, Jordan, when you think about, that's getting to that point one day in the Messianic age, or if you want to say Messianic age, or Messiah itself, will be when these people will come together.
So what she's saying is basically the teaching of Rabbi Kook, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine. He died in 1935. He was a very famous mystical existentialist, and he was very much following the Hegel teaching. And he believed very strongly that there is a strong correlation between secularization and religious Zionist and the Messianic era, which means he believed that the timing between the two is so close to each other that has to be correlation between the tremendous galut, tremendous exile and suffering, and part of Geulah, which is the Jewish people in his interpretation reach a point that is no other way around but to turn around and have redemption. Not everyone agree with him. If you take scholars like Professor Scholem, very famous scholar at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, secular scholar, or professors like Rivka Schatz, Yosef Dan, very famous expert in this field, they hold that the very strong correlation between suffering and the land. Remember, in Buddhism we talk about suffering, and we say that suffering has a reason, like birth, like death. They hold that the suffering has a reason, and the suffering is connected to the land. There are others who disagree. Professor Moshe Aidel, famous scholar, he disagreed with that. He goes further to say, if you take the mystical doctrine in Judaism, like the Zohar, which again it's a debate if it was 2nd century or 13th century Spain, but those who hold that the Zohar is more the mystical doctrine of 700 years ago, is that a response to historical crisis? Which again, this is a very famous debate that Albert Camus, who's a famous existentialist, he tried to deal with the question of the whole fear or the cause and the result. And he said that since we don't know the whole picture. It has to be connected. The pieces has to be connected to each other. Again, you can take it or leave it, but many scholars hold that it's connected, not just rabbis like Kook. You have like Franz Rosenzweig. How many of you heard that name? Raise your hand. Excellent. That's good. Franz Rosenzweig, in his book, The Star of Redemption, he tried to say that whole idea of fear of death, or fear of ending of something, it's part of a process of awareness. It's like enlightenment in Buddhism. You believe that it's part of redemption, that's part of the process. Yes?
I think it is human nature to wish to resolve an issue by giving it an explanation.
Okay.
Sometimes things have no rational explanation,
Okay.
but in our culture, we want an answer that serves our particular bias or purpose.
Very nice. Everyone heard what she said?
No.
Okay, so what she said is, in our culture, there's always a tendency of people try to give explanation to every event, especially crisis. And they try to put together the event, which according to some is not necessarily the real reason. And sometimes there are those who try to give explanation, there are those who really refuse to give explanation. Someone who thinks in that matter a little different is like the late Rabbi Teitelbaum. Rabbi Teitelbaum was the Satmar Rebbe. He wrote a book called Vayoel Moshe, which is a very famous book. He opposed Zionism, he opposed the state of Israel, and he opposed any relationships between establishment of the state and the Holocaust. He interpreted the opposite way, that the worst thing happened to the Jewish people is the establishment of independent state. So again, as I said, it's you go between two different worlds, to the extreme, between the Kook and following the teaching of Hegel, who hold that it's we are in the world of tikkun, in the world of repair, and we are in the world of the positive process of repair. And he holds that part of teshuvah, meaning part of repentance, that Christianity is so strong in, it's a part of returning the land, which is the whole cause of the crisis of the Jewish people, which means he holds that because the husband and wife missed each other, which is the Song of Songs, in a sense, it's God and the nation of Israel, the assembly of Israel, they are missing each other because she's out in exile and is no longer a temple. Therefore, there is a great yearning to unite the two, and uniting them by having the Jewish land, the Jewish state back. That's very famous teaching of Rabbi Kook versus the other. I know that some people get excited. Just give me a moment. I see that some people raise their hand. Just let me finish that. There are others who go following that teaching. In most contemporary, great Professor Heschel, or the one who preceding him, Martin Buber, they hold that it cannot be a king without a nation, cannot be a doctor without a patient, cannot be a leader without followers. And therefore, because we have a constant dialogue with God, that's part of the dialogue by the need of returning to a land. Again, you can dispute that. Yes?
Can it be argued that it really doesn't make any difference?
Okay.
Because there's an existence of Israel. Israel's not a religious state. It's both religious and secular. It exists as it is. And to find out whether by coincidence or very similar to the Red Sea opening from going out of Egypt. Was it coincidence or was it divine providence?
All right.
Doesn't, to my mind, it doesn't make any difference.
Okay. What he said it makes no difference if it's a real connected or not. It's like the old debate between the school of philosophy and the school of Kabbalah. The school of philosophy hold that things happen just by coincidence. School of Kabbalah hold everything esoteric. Yes?
You know, Israel was one of three choices. It was not connected to the Bible when it was first offered to the Jews. England didn't want to take them in. Europe, they didn't want to go back to Europe. America didn't want them. South America didn't want them. They had to stick them somewhere. And they gave them a choice. They said, you can have Germany, you can have Uganda, you can have Palestine. And they said, well, most people are not going to want to go back to Germany. They're not going to take that. Uganda is too hot. Israel, Palestine, we can all of a sudden make Israel, make Hebrew a language and connect the people back to the land so that there'll be a heartfelt feeling for all these Europeans that they really belong in Israel. And that's really how Israel came about. It wasn't like this strong move, we need to get back to land. People were stuck with no place, and America was not taking them in.
All right. So everyone heard what she said?
No.
Okay, so basically she's, okay. The key point that all of you try to describe is try to give either explanation or no explanation to that example. But what I try to tell you, it's much deeper in that sense, is the more theological point of the whole four religion, which is all in interpretation, which means you can take any incident and go to the extreme or go to different interpretation, and it's really in the hand of whoever hold the religious practice to give his or her own interpretation to incidents. Another good example is this one, right? You can go to the four different religions and they give a different interpretation to that tragedy. Who is right? I have no answer, but it's like asking questions over Holocaust. There are some who try to give an answer. I do not have an answer to Holocaust, so I do not have an answer to 9/11. But again, is that connected to suffering? Is that cause and effect? Is that connected to the very strong some part of the Islam believes? Is that connected to the prophecy of Jesus or the prophecy of others in the New Testament over the future that some theologian Christians hold? Is that connected to the teaching of the Messianic era in the book of Timothy or the book of Luke? Or is that connected to the Jewish approach, which is also the same as the, in a way, Christian approach from the book of Jeremiah or book of Isaiah or book of Zechariah, dealing with crisis before the great war between Gog and Magog, between the two mighty nations? Is that two mighty nations applied to Islam versus Christianity, etc.? Again, it's all in interpretation. You can take it in so many different directions, and people can go in many different ways, and it's all very dangerous path. But it is what it is. The next topic I would like to share with you again, it's very much connected to the whole four different religion or different faith, which is comparison of women in the four major religions. Well, I was hesitant before I dealt with this topic. I see your faces. Do you want to skip this part?
No.
Let's skip it. Well, what I try to prove to you, my friends, is that if you go to the extreme, in every group, they can have their own way of interpretation. Yes, in Christianity, if you look at the original doctrine of Christianity and the Christianity of today, it's two different worlds when it's come to women. Even still part of the Catholicism, the priesthood, etc., it still hold women in a sense of the necessary evil. But the most change in Christianity from the earliest time to our time, it's a huge reformation, huge renaissance. Judaism the same in that sense. The development of the women's rights or feminists between the ancient stories of Sarah and Miriam and all these biblical prophetesses, or Deborah that was a judge, to our times, see so many ordination of women and cantor, etc., etc. So it's a huge development. How about Buddhism? Buddhism basically it's relatively liberal compared to Hinduism. But if you look at deeply at Buddhism in some part, in some school of thought, it's also a lot of extremes. So let's visit those four major religions or major beliefs and see how really they hold the women. First, I want to bring some examples of extreme in the 4 major religions. Anybody know an extreme treatment of women in a Judaism, in a Jewish faith? Yes.
Freedom riders,
What?
women who get on public buses.
Excellent. The women that get on a public bus, your name? Karen. The women on the buses, now they get to the point that you have in a certain section, which also in some places in New York, a like separation within the bus, not just separate buses, but separation, like big separation part, mehitza it's called in Hebrew, that women cannot get in or men cannot get to the other section within the buses. Very good. What else? Yes.
No women take communion.
In some places, in the Orthodoxy, women cannot count as part of the decorum for prayer. Some. Yes.
Marriage.
In the marriages. Very good. In marriages, the set of marriages, yes. In divorce, yes. Is the same as any other religion? Anybody knows? Is there any similarity to Islam law? Very similar, right? In the sense of the women's rights. Okay. Yes.
Rabbi, would you be so kind as to go into your background a little bit and tell us what happened when you wanted to get married?
Ooh.
And what's this with the mirrors?
Well, yes, I came from the Hasidic family. I'm like the black sheep or whatever you call it. So, yes, when in our family there is a arranged marriage, that's basically they don't see each other before they get married, and it's a very strict rules. Part of my upcoming book, Life After Life, I wrote several pages of true description of an arranged marriage of a friend of mine. I changed his name, but it's based on true story. Any volunteer wants to read it, it's only 2 pages. You know what? How about you, Linda? Please. It's short. It's over there. So this is an example of extreme. Even, it happened several years ago, but it can be for sure in 2012 in any extreme part in Judaism. Just raise your voice so they can hear you. Oh, let me put the microphone. Yeah.
I think it's sort of there's such a minority that I think, unfortunately, I know, and Oprah just did a show a long time ago going into an area of extreme orthodoxy, but within the majority of modern orthodoxy and Hasidism and the Chabad movement, it is not so today.
As I said at the very beginning, thank you. I said at the very beginning that in every group there are extremes. We're just using the word extreme. You see the title? That's the word. Yes, please.
Okay, and I, like a proud mama with her son, myself with the rabbi, I just have to take one moment to divert from this class and say that, if you excuse me, Rabbi, he's so very humble. The rabbi was just asked to be the head rabbi of all of England. And I just wanted to share that with you to let you know the scope of intelligence we have. And he turned it down. So with that being said, I just want to share with you the beauty of this man and how people appreciate him all over the world, and that he's with us today, and we're very grateful for that, Rabbi. And I know I won't hear the end of what he's bragging about me for, because he never talks about himself, but I'm so proud to just hear that. All right, and here is from the rabbi's up-and-coming book. I studied in a religious high school for boys, only known as yeshiva, with a myriad extreme strict rules. I stretched my legs as I had made myself comfortable on the couch in my best friend Jonathan's house. He sat across from me on a reclining chair, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "So what did you get for your 18th birthday?" I asked. Oh, I could not ask for something better than this one. Jonathan just came back from 1 week's visit at his uncle's house in Jerusalem. I missed his birthday, and he was going to fill me in on that exciting visit. We were like two brothers and never kept any secret from each other. I was turning 18 in a couple of months. I'm going back to Jerusalem. I only came to take some things from my room. "Jonathan, we're seniors. You are missing so much school. What will the headmaster of the yeshiva say? First of all, you will be missing school too. You are going with me. And secondly, the headmaster's delighted about it and will let us make up our studies. You two are smart already. Catching up will be a piece of cake for you." "What on earth do you mean by that?" "I'll tell you, but you have to promise not to cut me off." "Promise," I said, resting my head on the side of the couch, ready for another of Jonathan's long answers to a short question. "My parents sent me to Jerusalem to meet my soulmate." "What?" I jumped on my feet. "You promised not to interrupt," he said, rebuking me with his facial expression. "Sorry," I said as I sat down on the couch again. "You know, people like us are supposed to get married before age 19, so we will not stray in our ways. So my parents already met the matchmaker and my future in-laws before I even knew what was happening. The engagement, wedding, financial plans were all done already. This is the way it's always been done in our community, and you know it. So before my vacation, I had no clue what was awaiting me. In my uncle's house, I met a big, important-looking rabbi. He quizzed me rapid fire on the Bible, Talmud, Kabbalah, you name it. Right away, he liked my answers. My father and uncle were sitting across the room, big smiles. Little did I know this rabbi was my future bride's father, checking out the merchandise. When he finished the interrogation, he whispered something to my father and walked out. My uncle and my father jumped up with big hugs and congratulations. I had no clue what was happening, but it seemed like I won a big contest. "I knew the rabbi would like you, my son," my father said. I could see he was proud and a little emotional, like we don't usually see him. I could see he was proud, and I asked my father who this rabbi was and why the interrogation. Then my father got choked up and told me I'll be marrying this rabbi's daughter, Shana Chernovitz. While I was sleeping and sightseeing, they were arranging my wedding right under my nose. My parents already met her parents 4 times, and my parents even met my future wife once, before I even knew anything about her. I couldn't hold back another second. I don't dare. I don't care about them. Did you meet her, is what I want to know. Not yet. I refused to meet her unless you were with me. I am very nervous about this mirror situation. Not the mirror, I explained. You will let them do that to you? Calm down already. We all go through that. Yes, they all go through that, but I never let that happen to me. I was determined in my mind to not follow the herd. Hasidic boys are not allowed to look or touch girls, not in our immediate families. So when a young man is ready to meet his future bride, we have to look at one another in reflection of a mirror, positioned so we can see each other's face. And Jonathan's reflection of a mirror, positioned so, and Jonathan just informed me that he wants me to be part of this ritual, which I despised and vowed and didn't want to participate in. He left the room and returned with a handheld mirror and one of his mother's wigs on a mop. Married Hasidic women only allow their husbands to see the beauty of their real hair, so they wear wigs outside the bedroom. I couldn't stop laughing at the sight of Jonathan talking to the reflection of the wig on a mop in the little mirror. "Jonathan, you're crazy. Next time it will be a real girl. You do not know the girl. You will see her only once through a mirror, get engaged, not see her anymore for a few months, and then get married? What if you don't love her? I trust my parents, and love will conquer all. But what if she is crazy or has bad habits, which you can't stand? What if she doesn't love you? I had a billion questions running through my mind. What if this will happen to me? This is what I have to look forward to? I thought quietly to myself, if I looked at the mirror and see an ugly wench, I just tell my parents that I'm certainly not interested. You are pickier when you buy a loaf of bread, Jonathan. This is serious stuff. This is getting married. Come on, Michael, it's not such a big deal. You will do it for me, won't you? I came to your home. Please don't disappoint me. I need to meet her tomorrow. Tomorrow? You are out of your mind. Rabbi Goldberg already arranged it with your parents and with the headmaster. Apparently, they worked very fast. I had no choice. I could not abandon my friend in such a critical time. I sat across from him at the table. He looked absolutely ridiculous with the wig, and I had a hard time keeping a straight face when he mimicked a woman's voice. He positioned the mirror again and again until he learned how to manipulate the angle. I was his guinea pig. We set off for Jerusalem. The meeting was set the next day at our parents' house. Everyone agreed for me to be present as long as I come in from the kitchen's back door, stay in the kitchen, and leave the same way. Jonathan, however, was to come in and leave through the front door as a respected groom. I gladly agreed. I did not want to be next to his bride. The next day, Jonathan's parents got there before us as expected. They sat in the dining room, which was positioned in between the kitchen and the living room. Shana and her parents sat on one side while Jonathan's parents sat on the other side. When we both got in about half an hour after Jonathan's parents arrived, all the parents left the dining room and went to sit in the living room. I entered the kitchen before Jonathan, knocked on the front door, and entered. I positioned myself in a way to see Jonathan and give him a sense of security. I saw him approaching the empty side of the table. I knew she must have been on the other side, but made sure not to look there and stay out of sight as per their strict instructions. Jonathan hesitantly walked forward, wearing his long black coat and traditional Hasidic hat. His eyes were lowered and he gazed at the floor as he approached his chair, holding the same mirror we practiced with the day before. As he sat down, I looked at him and suddenly realized that right behind him there was a china cabinet with a big glass mirror at the back of it. They did not plan it right. I saw Jonathan right before me. I saw her better than he would see her until their wedding day. She looked really frightened. She also looked down. I was going to comment that they both look like they are here to marry the floor and not each other, but I bit my tongue quietly. Jonathan started mumbling some Bible commentary explanation, which he prepared ahead of time while raising the mirror slowly to check his future wife. Can you imagine this? And this still goes on today, folks, this same scenario. He knew that his parents and her parents were watching every single move from the dining room, while I was watching it from the kitchen. He was very nervous. I could tell him already exactly how she looked. It was awkward, but I had the better mirror. Her hair was wavy and light brown color. Her eyes, which she raised for a moment, were light blue, and freckles covered her face. Not my type, I thought to myself. I started feeling sorry for her. She most likely will have to shave her hair and cover her head with a wig, like the rest of the women in this Hasidic community. She whispered something, but I could not hear her. He kept talking about the commentaries. Then he briefly gazed to the living room. Rabbi Goldberg got up right away and brought him a cup of water. Now Jonathan said a blessing over the water and drank it. Shana replied, Amen. Jonathan got up and so did Shana. I could tell that they were not compatible physically. She was a bit taller and heavier set, while he was a little shorter and slim. But looks had nothing to do with this situation. Jonathan positioned the mirror and looked at Shana standing up. Now he turned back, thanked everyone in the living room, said his goodbyes, and walked out. I quietly left from the back door. We met outside and did not talk until we were far from this house. And do you want me to continue, Rabbi? Did you see her? She is beautiful, he said. I was silent. I knew that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, or the mirror in this case. I'm going to marry her. I'm going to say yes to my parents. Jonathan, aren't you rushing into this? Michael, are you nuts? I have been fantasizing about a woman for a long time now. I need my female or I will go out of my mind. I need to have my relations already. You are going to get married so you can have physical relations? Yes, every day and more than once. I felt like I did not know Jonathan anymore. This boy was one of the smartest boys in our yeshiva, and he was going to throw his life away. True, and true today, right,
So
Rabbi?
this is an example. So this is an example of the extreme. And as Tali said, it's not represent every group, but it's just a group that show you the extreme. Let's go to other example. We talk about Buddhism. This is one of the famous writing, but in Buddhist Women and the Social Justice, I'm going to show you some very painful pictures, and some of them I don't need to comment, you just need to see by yourself. It's all, again, an extreme examples. Anybody recognize this? Anybody know that movie? So you see here, I just brought those some pictures to show you as much as you can gain a lot of knowledge from Buddhism, and there's a lot that we can learn not only about enlightenment, but the development of Buddhism and the way that they help the world. There's still also the dark side of the extremes in every place. Same apply in the Muslim world. Again, it was a huge development since the beginning. There are still the Sunnah and the Shia, the big debate. Is still very serious debate even over this issue of head covering, veil, and everyone think that they, exactly the people who represent God, what is right. So the extreme are Iran and Saudi Arabia, but you can go to other places in the world, you see the it's a very famous research. It's a picture in Iran, 2011, October 2011. I don't need to say much. But again, the dress code enforced in the most brutal way. And this is one of the famous Shia leaders that preaching the authenticity and the literal part of the Quran in the sense of the Quran and application to our days. So he is really preaching for the extreme part. Now, if you recall in the past, we discussed Muhammad al-Ghazali. Do you remember that? Al-Ghazali is the early Sufi teaching. Al-Ghazali himself, again, is different time. We're talking about 9th century, but in the 9th, 10th century, in his Alchemy of Happiness, which is a book that distributed by hundreds of millions copies, there is a section about women, how far you're allowed to beat her, etc., etc. There's a very long section involved with this, and what part of the body you allow, and believe it or not, there are some who still hold it as a divine text. This is Iran 2011. They suspected her for being a daughter, and that's the part before the final stoning. So again, as much as the Sufi teaching is tremendous and bring a lot of goodness, there is another side of the extreme in every group. How about Christianity? So if you divide it within the Christianity between Protestant and Catholicism, you can come to a variety of conclusions. But the original point of doctrine is the idea of the original sin. Early Christianity is a doctrine that speaks about women in a sense of something related to a sin, which means it's something that they describe as a monster or evil or terrible thing that happened to the world, but that's the reason why the Virgin Mary was not involved with the sin, because it cannot be a Jesus, Christ, and Virgin Mary involved in any form of regular sin that you and I recognize in the mind of those. Now, what happened in Christianity, as we said earlier, it was a huge development. There are still some sects in Christianity that hold that all the relationship with women is just basically the necessary evil in order to survive the world, while the majority of the evangelical and other sects in Christianity hold a different school of thought, and they modernize Christianity by having a new doctrine that constantly in the process of change. Yet, as we said again, there are the extremes from the Southern Baptist to the extreme part of the priesthood in Catholicism also have issue with the treatment of women. This is an example of extreme in Christianity. It's the church in Iran. And again, if you read the doctrine, which I don't want to go through details now, it's again, go to the extreme. So again, this is all doctrine of Christianity in regard to women. And for sure it's changed. The funny part of this is the original doctrine, Jesus himself has some type of interaction of women, with women. Let me show you an example from the book of Luke and another one or two examples. Here they say that Jesus visits the house of Martha, also living there with her sister Mary and her brother Lazarus, whom Jesus will in the future raise from the dead. And while Jesus is teaching, Mary sits at his feet, while Martha is concerned with the preparations and serving for all the guests that have come in. Martha complained to Jesus and tell Mary to help her serving, and Jesus' reply is basically that Mary has chosen the one thing that is really important. And the passage said, which can go in many interpretations, and I'm just quoting the words, in Luke chapter 10, that's the international version, the home of Martha and Mary. It said, and I quote, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparation that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or needed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So here we have in some very good commentary and teaching of this passage that dealt with women and their role and the different interpretations much more in depth, which can go to many extremes, from Christian to early Jewish perspective, and again can go in many different directions. But as we said, things change and things develop, and things are much better. The last phase I would like to make before we finalize our journey is the issue of life after life. The afterlife in all the four major religions. The mechanism and differences. Let me start by saying that all four, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, believe in the life after life, in the brevity of this life and continuation of life. This is a description, you see the picture, but it's basically a description of something that all the four religions deal somehow, which is a description, you hear it in endless different angles from different people, of someone who's experienced with a clinical death, and he or she saw something like a tunnel and sunlight at the end of the tunnel. Anyone ever heard that story? Please raise your hand. Ooh, see almost everyone. That's wonderful. So, what exactly happened? And how that happened? That's a very interesting debate. Anybody knows what Buddhism said? What is exactly what the picture demonstrates in Buddhism? Yes, please. Karen? Nirvana. Nirvana is quiescent, very good, which is, since the transmigration, which in Christianity is called reincarnation, reoccur so many times, therefore, in order to reach the quiescent, Nirvana is quiescent, in order to reach that stage, this is part of that reaching, that the body is basically disconnected from the spirit, from the soul. That's one school of thought. This is just another example. Is a description of what? What do you see in the picture? Okay, so this is a dead person, right? And he's leaving his body. And later, by the story, he was taken to the hospital and he came back to life. And this is a almost common story you hear from people who went through a crisis, accident, all kind of crisis, and they describe out-of-body experiences. Are we on the same page? Thank you. So, the belief in the life after death is a very strong part of all four religions. Take, for example, the Sufism. What exactly Sufism said about life after death? Anybody knows? We talk about it. What?
The 18 virgins?
72 virgins, yes. What else? So in Sufism, there is a very strong school of thought that is called Naturosophy, which is the school of thought that speaks about spirit that is a part of God and is just constitute part of the surviving of the body, but that part belongs to God, to Allah. And since that part is part of God, it's just returned to God. So in that sense, physical death means nothing because the brevity of life is just, it's nothing. So in that sense, it's a feeling that it's a completion of mission in life, and therefore there is no need to be in a physical body and goes back to God. Yes? In that sense, Islam and Judaism agreed, yes, that it's returned. All the sparks, yes, that's the theory of the Ari, that's all agreed. This is the Jewish approach to that. It's the very famous triangle in Judaism. They contain the name of God. It's basically 72 names of God in Judaism. Combination. Anybody remember who invented those combinations? We talk a lot about it in the second lecture. Excellent. Abu Lafia in the 11th century, he is the one who basically put it together. He was excommunicated and he went through a tremendous crisis, but he was the one who brought about the numbers, the gematria, the combinations, the idea of a dualism between God and the world. The numbers, he described God as a musician, as someone who invented the music. It's very, he talked in a very dialectical ambiguity, which means he talked about God that, in a sense, returning to what God has invented himself in that sense, and is all the theological idea that there is a continuation of life and is no death. What exactly happened to a baby before the person is born? Anybody knows what Buddhism